So very warm greetings to you all. Just to let you know, before we start the session, that after the session I'll be circulating posting a feedback form. And we very much like you to share your experiences in this particular course. Will help us to evaluate where we stand with our programs, and yes, it will be very helpful. And also, we will be circulating certificates at the end of the course next week sometime. So we'll be in touch about that as well. Okay, so over to you, Vladimir, for the final session, and I hope you all benefit from it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, James, and everyone for coming again. And today is our final summarizing session of all what we learned from the Vedic Vision and Sri Aurobindo's understanding of it and interpretation of it, and using it in his magnum opus Savitri. It is his major work, Savitri. It is fundamental in one regard, that all his knowledge he put into one poem. And he chose poem from Mahabharata. This story is narrated in Mahabharata by Markandeya Rishi, as you know. And Markandeya Rishi himself was the immortal being. Interestingly, he received his boon of immortality from the beginning of Kalpa, not even Manvantara. So over 7 Kalpas, he is living as an immortal being, crossing over those pralayas in between. He received the boon from Shiva himself, but interestingly enough, he became the devotee of the Divine Mother. And he has his fundamental work. Markandeya Purana has this Devi Mahatmya. Everybody knows about Devi Mahatmya in India, yes? Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu. This is Markandeya. So he is the devotee of the Divine Mother. By the way, the mother used Markandeya's mantra to create the mantra to invoke Sri Aurobindo and the mother also. And she used the first half of it is used from his Devi Mahatmya. Maybe we should start with it today. Om Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Matri Rupena Sanstita Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Shakti Rupena Samsthita Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Shanti Rupena Samsthita Namastasyai Namastasyai, Namastasyai, Namo Namaha, Om Namo Namaha, Shri Mirambekayai, Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Aurovindaya. Om Namo Namaha Shri Mirambekayai. Shri Aurovinda Sharanam Mama. This mantra was given by the mother to to invoke Sri Aurobindo and the mother, because Satprem asked her, give us some mantra. And so she did create this mantra. And what is interesting is the first half is Devi Mahatmya of Markandeya. That very Markandeya who narrated this story to Yudhishthira, when Yudhishthira in the very critical moment of their life asked Markandeya, was there someone who suffered as much as Draupadi in this world ever? And he said, yes, there was one, that was Savitri. And I will tell you this story, but this story is very ancient. So if it is ancient to Markandeya, we can imagine what this story is about. Interestingly, Sri Aurobindo says that this story belongs to the Vedic cycle, to the ancient vision of the beginning of creation. And as we know, in this story there are 4 different personalities, and we will go deeper into this story and with all the symbolism in a minute. But those first 4 emanations, there are 4 great personalities in the story which are matching these first 4 fallen emanations and represent these 4 personalities, represent those powers, divine powers of second creation, who came down to redeem them, to bring them back to their self-awareness. Basically, this is the story of the whole creation, of the fallen emanations and the emanations which came to bring back them to their self-awareness, to transform the fallen emanations into their divine prototypes. So, if it is so, then there is only one story we have to know, and that is Savitri. All the elements of creation and the aim of creation and the outcome are there. And this is kind of interesting for us. Of course, the whole Savitri is charged with numbers of imageries and symbols. It is, truly speaking, totally Vedic in its symbolism. Similes, metaphors, everything, presumptions, presuppositions which Sri Aurobindo is using are all Vedic. Those who study Vedas, they will see it immediately. I hope that our course will help us to really see those elements in Savitri now. And Savitri will become more accessible to us. So what is also interesting, before writing Savitri in 1916, we see the first passages of Savitri, which Sri Aurobindo was already writing in his manuscripts. He approached the mother for her blessing. He approached the mother for her blessing to write Savitri when she came first time from 1914 to 1915. And she gave him the blessing, and so he started his composition. It's amazing, yeah? So the mother herself gave the blessing to write about her. It is her story, yeah? Savitri. It's about her, the incarnate word. So with this short introduction, I will project the slides. By the way, I must mention here, just in passing, that I did the research work for when I was in Auroville. I was working in Savitri Bhavan, by the way, and worked with Savitri extensively, so to say, recording all the recordings by Shraddhavan, by other sadhaks, by Nirod Baran, all these editions and publications are done by me, basically. So I did all those and so I went through different ways of reading Savitri, and I saw how it is how it is truly, well, as Mother says, the power of transformation. It is the mantra of transformation of the world. It is slowly and gradually transforming your consciousness and perception of things. So let us look into this imagery. So I did the work for 3 years, research in Savitri, which was even funded by the government of India, and it was published there in Savitri Bhavan. Somewhere that book, big volume, is there with all the imagery which I collected, Vedic imagery from Sri Aurobindo Savitri, highlighting and making references to the Vedas. Today I want to cover the story as the symbol. It is a legend and a symbol. I want to address this symbolic part of Savitri, what it really symbolizes. I did this before with some of you, and many of you know already this, but to go together through it with the material we collected from before is another attempt to understand deeper this profound scripture. So this is the author's note, which is published with Savitri. It's a part of the letter. There's some footnote for me or something. Let me... Right, and in some way, this was a letter, but it became a part of the introduction to Savitri, because in few sentences Sri Aurobindo defines the whole symbolism. Without this letter, without this paragraph, our understanding of Savitri would be very vague, and we would not be able to match it with the vision of the Veda. So the tale of Satyavan and Savitri is recited in the Mahabharata as a story of conjugal love conquering death. But this legend is, as shown by many features of the human tale, one of the many symbolic myths of the Vedic cycle. Satyavan is the soul carrying the divine truth of being within itself, but descended into the grip of death and ignorance. So Satyavan is that soul, actually, of humanity which plunged to do this work of redemption. So it was caught into this grip of death and ignorance, yes, though it is luminous and divine, but lost itself there in this ignorance and darkness. Savitri is the divine word, that very word we were referring yesterday, daughter of the sun, goddess of the supreme truth, who comes down and is born to save. The Divine Mother. Ashvapati, the Lord of the horse. Ashva, horse, Pati, Lord. Her human father is the Lord of Tapasya, the concentrated energy of spiritual endeavor that helps us to rise from the mortal to the immortal planes. And that is a protagonist of Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo is Ashvapati. He called to the Mother as the divine word to manifest here and to save the humanity. Dyumatsena, Lord of the shining hosts, Father of Satyavan, is the divine mind here fallen blind, losing its celestial kingdom of vision, and through that loss its kingdom of glory. Now notice Sri Aurobindo says two things. He lost the vision and kingdom of glory. We will come to this double loss later. Still, this is not mere allegory. The characters are not personified qualities, but incarnations or emanations of living and conscious forces with whom we can enter into concrete touch, and they take human bodies in order to help man and show him the way from his mortal state to a divine consciousness and immortal life. So we see four characters. Yeah? Satyavan is the soul of humanity, in the grip of death and darkness. Savitri is the Divine Mother, the Divine Word descending to save him here from that grip of darkness, support his growth and immortality here, bring him to the front, and two parents, Ashwapati on one side, the father of Savitri, and Dyumatsena, the father of Satyavan. So we have two kings, just now mentioned them. Dyumatsena, the Lord of Shining Hosts. Interesting. Dyumat, Sena. Sena is the army, Dyumat of the lightnings or the rays of light, the army of the rays of luminous beings, the king of knowledge. The rays Gava, Husrach in the Veda are the symbols of consciousness in its aspect of knowledge. Here, in the lower hemisphere, falls blind and thus loses his kingdom. As we said this already, that the light of consciousness lost its and became darkness, yes, descended to the darkness. So turned into the darkness by descending into time and space. So this light of knowledge became blind, became darkness. But he has a son, and his son is Satyavan, a growing soul of man, a prince, a king to be, who cannot live without the support of light and truth in the darkness of this creation, and therefore is destined to die within a year. Year is a symbolic again. And within the full circle, it will not sustain when the circle is over. Nor as a prince has he any future, for his father has already lost his kingdom. So he is the prince without the kingdom. Ashwapati is the lord of the horse. Ashva, horse, in the Veda is a symbol of power, energy, force in opposition to Gauch, the cow or ray of light as a symbol of knowledge. The cow is to be in front of the horse, as the Rishi says. Knowledge is to rule the power. Here, in the lower hemisphere, Ashwapati is involved in tapasya, concentrated spiritual effort dedicated to the Divine Mother, Savitri, goddess of the supreme truth, calling her to support his work on earth with heirs. Otherwise, his work has no future, since he has no son to continue it. So we have two kings. One king has the son but has no kingdom and no future. On the other side, we have Ashwapati, who doesn't have a son but has a kingdom. So the Lord of the power has the kingdom, the Lord of the light and knowledge does not have the kingdom, but has a son, the soul. So you remember the story, we started with this in our first presentation. So these four emanations fell into their opposite one by one: consciousness in light, bliss, truth, life. One by one. First consciousness in light, then bliss, then truth, and finally life. So we have also four boons in the story. At the end of the story, the Lord of death, so to say, gives four boons. He gives the return of the sight of Satyavan, Dyumatsena, Father Dyumatsena, return of the kingdom to Dyumatsena, so 2 boons within 1 boon, let us say. Return of his sight, he was blind, now he's not blind. They are one by one in this order. Yeah? Return of the kingdom to Dyumatsena, which he once lost. Then the 100 sons of Ashwapati, which he was asking from Savitri, the boon. He was aspiring by his tapasya, but he received 1 daughter. And finally, 100 sons for Savitri and Satyavan, the 3rd boon, and finally the life of Satyavan. I presume that you know the story, so I do not tell you the story, what happened and how it was. Everybody knows the story, I assume, yes? Please say if somebody doesn't know the story, because then it is useless for me to speak this way. I have to highlight the story first. What happened? Let me stop for a second and see your faces. Who doesn't know the story? Please raise your hand. Oh, nobody raises the hand. So I will continue in my way, okay? You know what happened, yes? Savitri came instead of 100 sons to Ashwapati. She was born, she was so beautiful, nobody could marry her because she was so beautiful and truthful that nobody felt that he is the match to Savitri. So Ashwapati announced that she should go and find her match in the world, her mate. So she traveled all over the world and she didn't find anyone, but one day she found Satyavan on the road and she recognized in him her mate. And so she said, I will come. So she rushed home to her father, and there was Narad, who announced that she made the wrong choice, that Satyavan must die in 1 year, and nothing you can do about this. And she said, in Sri Aurobindo's story, if I must die, I also know how to die. So she chose Satyavan anyhow. She goes to the forest, lives with him. Nobody knows that he must die within a story, within 1 year. Only she and nobody else. His parents also do not know in the forest. So when the time comes, she makes tapasya of 3 days. She stands and without food, without sleep, without drink, 3 days and 3 nights. And then she goes with him to the forest and she meets Yama in the Mahabharata, or the Lord of Death in Sri Aurobindo's story. And there is this dialogue, there is this between love and death, as Sri Aurobindo says, yes. In Mahabharata, she speaks to Yama in such a beautiful way, so she gives her boons one by one. And at the end, somehow, he missed the point and gave her the boon of 100 sons, and this is constantly misinterpreted, and without life of Satyavan. So every time he gives the boon, he says, take any boon without the life of Satyavan. And she said, the 3rd boon, I want the 100 sons from Satyavan. And he said, Tathastu, let it be so. And but how could she have 100 sons from Satyavan if he takes his life? Yeah? So the last boon, when he says, take any boon, and he doesn't mention without life of Satyavan, and she immediately comes in and says, the life of Satyavan. Let Satyavan live. That was her words. So this is a very unusual story because the prediction was made that he will die within a year. Nothing you can do about it by Narada himself. All the epic stories actually show us the prediction is happening. We do not know one story where the prediction did not happen. It always happens. And here, with her unchanging will, she changed the prediction. So it shows us that this story belongs to the very ancient cycle of myths. It doesn't fit into the epic style at all. It stands out by this change of destiny. So this is briefly the layout of the story for those who didn't know or didn't remember. Now I'm coming back to my presentation. So these are the 4 boons. They are very important. These are the redemption of 4 fallen emanations. So the return of the sight of Satyavan in this world, and return to, to Dyumatsena, and return to Dyumatsena his kingdom. In this world, in time and space, and the birth of 100 sons of Ashvapati, which is also was not possible, and finally the 100 sons of Savitri and Satyavan, and this life of Satyavan. So we will look into the symbolism of these boons now in a minute. So, return of sight and kingdom for Dyumatsena, the Lord of Knowledge, could be seen as a symbol of the return of consciousness in light from the state of darkness. So conversion of the asura of darkness. 100 sons of Ashvapati, the Lord of Power, is probably a symbol of return of bliss to its origin. In the story of Markandeya, it is mentioned that Ashvapati, being a perfect king, loved by all his subjects, suffered a lot. Santapam upajagmivan, this is the exact phrase. From having no progeny, anapatyam, he had no offspring. In order to recover from that suffering, he performed that tapasya for 18 years. Yeah? So he received, instead of 100 sons, 1 daughter, Savitri. Savitri goddess came to him and said, ask any boon. He said 100 sons, and she said, no, I will not give you 100 sons, I will give you 1 daughter. He was very disappointed, but he didn't argue, because she said, you cannot argue about this matter. And he understood that this is very ominous, very important not to argue, and to receive the boon. So he received the boon, the daughter was born, and he named her Savitri. And it seems that the daughter herself was that very Savitri, the goddess. She wanted to be embodied instead of 100 sons. She had to come as the Divine Mother down to convert all these fallen emanations, to bring them back to their self-awareness, to save Satyavan, the soul of humanity. That was her decision. That's why she didn't give him 100 sons, because it would continue forever, that transformation. She had to come and do it for him. So 100 sons of Savitri and Satyavan boon might be a symbol of a conversion of the falsehood into truth. Truth fell, the 3rd one. It is a symbol of the supramental manifestation upon earth, with all its multitude of souls. Here, Savitri is the Divine Mother, and all men are her children, psychic beings. You remember in Savitri, I saw the sun-eyed pioneers rushing down. This is that supramental manifestation. The new generations will come. The souls come here down from bringing this connection to the supramental world. And the final life of Satyavan, the soul of man, of humanity, will not die anymore. It is the symbol of conversion of death into its counterpart, the divine life, immortality. So this is briefly the outline of this vision, the Vedic vision of transformation, or the sacrifice. There's something very interesting here. When the 4th boon was given, this is what I want to highlight before I proceed. And he kind of got mistaken and didn't understand, because he said, choose any boon. And she chose the 100 sons for herself with Satyavan. He gave her this boon without the life of Satyavan, though he said, choose any boon without the life of Satyavan. And in Indian tradition, they say that she actually cheated on him. Yeah, because he has to follow on his word, what he promised he has to do. So he promised any boon without life of Satyavan, but she said 100 sons of with Satyavan, that means not his life as it were. And I read many commentaries that she is actually cheated on him with this boon. But I don't think she has cheated him. He understood what it means. But that conversion of the falsehood into truth had to be first activated. So what do we have? We have these first activation, first redemption has to be the consciousness in light. The darkness has to be converted into light. Consciousness, awareness, the knowledge, the higher knowledge has to come back. Once it is done, then there will be also the return of the kingdom. What is this return of the once lost kingdom of Dyumatsena? Is that psychic being. Psychic being is to come to the front and claim its kingdom here in this lower hemisphere. Once it is done, then the bliss comes back, this higher conversion of the spiritual transformation. After psychic transformation, you remember 3 transformations in our first presentation. After psychic transformation, spiritual transformation is to take place. The bliss is to be found everywhere. The psychic is to live constantly in the presence of his beloved universal soul, yes? Finding himself in all beings and all beings in himself. And that is the great return of bliss, conversion of suffering into bliss. And then only we can come to the supramental transformation, which is the 100 sons of Savitri and Satyavan, the Divine Mother and the soul of humanity. They are the eternal couple, the Divine Lord with his spouse. They have to produce the offspring here from the supramental world, and that only will save Satyavan. That only can generate immortality. So here I put this slide explaining that the boon of 100 sons for Savitri and Satyavan was not a mistake. The Lord of Death did not make a mistake. It was inevitable after the conversion of the fallen light into darkness into light and suffering into bliss. After 2 transformations, psychic and spiritual, this supramental was inevitable. He had to give this boon. And what Mother says here is very interesting. The capacity to know God can be achieved in the lower triplicity, the mind, the vital, and the physical, only with the supramental transformation. And this comes only just before the ultimate realization, which consists in becoming divine. So before immortality is gained, before Satyavan becomes immortal, does not have to leave this hemisphere, lower hemisphere, die, go into pralaya, before that, the supramental transformation is the must. Just before. So here these are the 4 fallen emanations. I drew them in this way. Look at this. I put them all onto the one big life, Sat, Chit, Ananda, Vijnana. So they are all here inbuilt within the Sat, within the divine being. First, the light falling into the darkness, then bliss into the suffering, the truth into the falsehood, and finally life is dragged into the death. Sat becomes, can die for the first time. So, and in the same order they have to be recovered. The consciousness in light, or light of knowledge, is to be recovered first. It is the firstborn. Dyumatsena gains his sight. That's why when Yama in Mahabharata and Lord of Death in Sri Aurobindo Savitri asks her, ask any boon. The first boon she asks, the sight of Dyumatsena. And it sounds a little bit like a humble request, because she doesn't ask for Satyavan or her father. She asks for her father-in-law. And the first thing, sight. Knowledge has to return. And then the second one, she asks for his kingdom. Dyumatsena, her father-in-law kingdom. Of course, it is all misinterpreted by Indian tradition as she is a humble, daughter-in-law. That's why she's doing this and not asking for what she really is looking for. She's looking for transformation of all these beings. And then she asks for the 100 sons, and that is truth. Falsehood turned into truth. And finally, the Lord of Death cannot mention, ask any boon without accept the life of Satyavan. He doesn't mention that phrase, and she immediately says, let Satyavan live. Sri Aurobindo in Savitri also describes the falling of these emanations. In the enigma of the darkened vasts, in the passion of self-loss of the infinite, a contradiction founds the base of life. The eternal, the divine reality has faced itself with its own contraries. Being became the void, and conscious force nescience, and walk of a blind energy, and ecstasy took the figure of world pain. So the darkness, that very darkness which is to be converted, is actually a light of knowledge, unaware of the Supreme. So I've already spoke about this. I will not go back into them. Let me go forward. So what happened when the Lord of Death finally realized that he's not dealing with some lady who is following him into the other world trying to save her husband, but he deals with the Divine Mother. And in Sri Aurobindo Savitri, he tells her, let me look into your eyes that I may also look into the eyes of the Divine Mother. He realized who she was in Sri Aurobindo's story, interestingly. And so he tells her that even though you are the mother, this world was not made by knowledge, and you have profound knowledge and power. It was made by power. Show me your power. And when she revealed herself to him, he was shattered with force and destruction. So he calls to his one by one his powers. And look at the order in which he calls to his powers. He called to night, the darkness first, that fallen light. But she fell shuddering back, the night, withdrew from his call. He called to hell, suffering, but sullenly it retired. He turned to the inconscient falsehood for support, from which he was born, his vast sustaining self. It drew him back towards boundless vacancy, as if by himself to swallow up himself. He called to his own strength, as himself, as blind energy of the Supreme. His body was eaten by light. his spirit devoured. At last he knew defeat inevitable, and left crumbling the shape that he had worn, abandoning hope to make man's soul his prey, and force to be mortal the immortal spirit. There are also 4 boons which are beautifully, poetically and significantly deeper expressed in Sri Aurobindo Savitri, and I wanted to go through them one by one. These are the boons given by the Lord himself. He is no more the Lord of death. He is the Lord who kind of removed the mask of the Lord of death, the Lord of Sat, truth. This what she hears. Choose, spirit, thy supreme choice not given again. For now from my highest being looks at thee, the nameless, formless peace, where all things rest. Peace. He suggests to her the boon he is going to give, and she has to ask him this boon. It's kind of amazing. And silently the woman's heart replied, thy peace, O Lord, a boon within to keep amid the roar and ruin of wild time. For the magnificent soul of man on earth, thy calm, O Lord, that bears thy hands of joy. Notice there are 2 elements here which are important for us to understand Sri Aurobindo's yoga. First, thy peace. This peace is the separation of Purusha from Prakriti, that witness consciousness above, which is constantly in the indestructible peace. That is the first thing. And she asks even in this way, that peace amid the roar and ruin of wild time, in this manifestation which is constantly changing, for the magnificent soul of man on earth. So he has to have a realization of his unborn self. He, the soul of man, has to have that peace coming from his witness. And the second one, the second half, thy calm, O Lord, that bears thy hands of joy. And many times Sri Aurobindo will refer these hands of joy are actually psychic management of this manifestation, of this kingdom. Hands are the symbol of the kshatriya, of the royalty, of the king who rules his kingdom. This is the hands. You remember when Purusha was projected, all his 4 varnas from the mouth, Brahmana was born, from his hands Rajanya. Rajanya is the kshatriyas, varna. The kings were born. Thy calm, O Lord, that bears thy hands of joy. Joy is psychic, hands is ruling this world, psychic transformation. So here we have 2 transformations within the psychic. One is finding of the unborn self, peace, and the other psychic coming to the front and ruling this body. In one, it is Dyumatsena's conversion. And by the way, psychic is the delegate of that soul of humanity. It is a projection, and he is the son of Dyumatsena in a way. It's amazing how everything comes together when we dwell on this Vedic imagery. Second boon, the second time, this is the boon for Ashwapati now. The second time the eternal cry arose. She hears the voice of the Lord. Wide open are the ineffable gates in front. My spirit leans down to break the knot of earth. Amorous of oneness without thought or sign, to cast down wall and fence, to strip heaven bare, see with the large eye of infinity, unweave the stars, and into silence pass. The cosmic transformation. Notice, the proposal is of the cosmic transformation to break the knot of earth. My spirit leans down to descend all these Godheads. This is the descent from above, has to take place. The spiritual transformation is to take place once the psychic is freed. In an immense and world-destroying pause, she heard 1,000,000 creatures cry to her. Now the whole world, this is the spiritual transformation, the universe. They heard the 1,000,000 creatures cry to her as her own cry. Through the tremendous stillness of her thoughts, immeasurably the woman's nature spoke now. The whole nature, the whole mother spoke. Thy oneness, Lord, in many approaching hearts, in this multitude of the souls, my sweet infinity of thy numberless souls. Thy oneness, Lord, in many approaching hearts, spiritual transformation, and my sweet infinity. Why my? In thy numberless souls. This is the Divine Mother's presence in every soul. Sweetness, sweet infinity. The third boon, this mysterious boon of the supramental manifestation. Once that is achieved, then another proposition comes from the Lord, mightily retreating like a sea in an ebb. A third time swelled the great admonishing call. I spread abroad the refuge of my wings. I spread abroad, says the Lord, the refuge of my wings. Out of its incommunicable deeps, my power looks forth of mightiest splendor, stilled into its majesty of sleep, withdrawn above the dreadful whirlings of the world, withdrawn transcendental supermind, the gate to the transcendent Satchitananda. She understands what she has to ask. A sob of things was answer to the voice. And passionately the woman's heart replied, Thy energy, Lord, to seize on woman and man, to take all things and creatures in their grief and gather them into a mother's arms. The Divine Mother Aditi has to gather all creatures and all things into her arms. This is the supramental transformation. This is 100 sons of Savitri and Satyavan. And finally, the boon number 4, solemn and distant. This is the immortality, the final boon. Solemn and distant, like a seraph's lyre. A last great time. The warning sound was heard. I open the wide eye of solitude to uncover the voiceless rapture of my bliss, the Ananda world, transcendental, from where our soul came, where in a pure and exquisite hush it lies motionless in its slumber of ecstasy, resting from the sweet madness of the dance, out of whose beat the throb of herds was born. The throb of hearts was born. Breaking the silence with a peal and cry, a hymn of adoration, tireless climbed, a music beat of winged, uniting souls. Then all the woman yearningly reply, thy embrace, which rends the living knot of pain, thy joy, O Lord, in which all creatures breathe, thy magic flowing waters of deep love, thy sweetness give to me for earth and man, the Ananda, the immortality. Sri Aurobindo does it in such a subtle and beautiful way that it requires really dwelling. So the last slide, I want to show you something which will kind of highlight everything what I was trying to say in this presentation. And these are the four major characters. Yes, we have blind Duryodhana, and these four major characters before Savitri's marriage. Why Savitri's marriage is so important. So before we have blind Duryodhana, who lost his kingdom, suffering Ashvapati. Yes, we have also unasked, unmarried Savitri, though she was the most beautiful and the most truthful maiden in the world. Nobody dared to ask her hand in marriage. And dying Satyavan. This was before the marriage. Now, after 1 year with Satyavan, what do we see? After the marriage, seeing Duryodhana, and he is the king. His kingdom is given back to him. Happy Ashvapati, he got his 100 sons. He can continue his work on earth. He has his progeny, his heir. Married Savitri, 100 sons, and living Satyavan. So total conversion of what was there before. So four supreme emanations, light turned into the darkness, was before blind Duryodhana, which is now becoming major realization of mukti, separation Purusha from Prakriti, and the hands of joy, reaching out, the psychic coming to the front. Suffering Ashvapati, or bliss turned into the suffering, cosmic self-realization of the Godhead in all the beings, seeing oneself in all and all in oneself, the oneness of the world. Now, truth turned into the falsehood, supramental realization, all the beings as one in knowledge and power. Bring this was the strength, thy energy, Lord, because energy was separated from knowledge, and once the energy, the power comes back to knowledge, if it is his illumined knowledge, that is the power which she wanted to get. That is the supramental transformation. And finally, life turned into death, transcendental realization of the Supreme Ananda, which is turning everything into joy, into the bliss. And that means establishing immortality. So peace, oneness, strength, joy. This is how Sri Aurobindo translates these four boons. And here I will stop and engage with you.